Okay, it's a new episode of Heads and Tails, and this time on this episode, we have the American social scientist, professor, and author BJ Fogg, founder of Stanford's Behavioral Design Lab and one of the most prominent behavioral scientists in the world. BJ is best known, I think, for developing the Fogg behavioral model framework that explains how behavior change occurs when three elements converge: motivation, ability, and a trigger. Now, this model has been fundamental and foundational in fields ranging from product design, health interventions, and where we come in, motivating young people. BJ is also the creator of the Tiny Habits method, a behavior change approach that focuses on small, sustainable changes to your life over time. His book, Tiny Habits, The Small Changes That Changed Everything, has become a bestseller and has, I believe, helped hundreds of thousands of people around the world. He is also known for mentoring students who have gone on to build quite successful businesses. He is known to have worked with one of the co-founders of Instagram, the COO of Notion, and others that I think we'll touch upon today. BJ, a very big welcome to Heads and Tails.
Hey, Walter. Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
It's a joy to have you. We've been following your work for some time. Let's start with the Instagram story then. What's the behavioral nudge that makes social media so addictive for young people?
Oh my gosh. Well, the co-founder of Instagram was in my class, and the idea for Instagram resulted in the final project. He was working with two other students. Now, at the time, the proposal, what he put forward, was not at all like Instagram of today. So he and another Stanford student co-founded Instagram. It grew, and then, as people know, it got bought by Mark Zuckerberg, and it became a whole different creature. Okay, but let me rewind. I think people listening are familiar with Instagram of today, so I don't think I have to go into that and how it prompts you or how it develops urges that you'll go in, and it's quite a different experience than it was in the early days. In the early days, so Mike Krieger was my student, and a big part of what I teach is simplicity. Simplicity changes behavior. Make it easy, make it easy. That's really the main strategy for getting people to do a behavior is make it easy. So in the context of Flickr and a bunch of other photo sharing um, products, Instagram came out, square photos, iOS only, and 12 filters, and that was it. It was just drop dead simple. And so they made it really, really easy to share. They allowed you to pick one of 12 filters, which helped you feel like I'm an artist, I'm showing a point of view. And I think that was the essence of it. The simplicity, number one. And two, helping people feel successful, that they were sharing something unique or something that expressed who they were. And now, in the context of all the other apps and platforms, Instagram was the simplest, and it provided, I think, in some ways, the fastest sense of achievement. I take a photo. In fact, the project for the class that they put forward was called Send the Sunshine. And I went back and looked at the brief they submitted at the end of the class, and it was about taking pictures of sunsets and sunrises and sharing it with friends who may not be in a place that are having that. So it really literally was that at the beginning. So I think the essence of that is still the same things I talk about. One, help people do what they already want to do. And one way to help them is to make it really easy. And number two, help people feel successful. And I think they did that effectively through the filters and letting people put their artistic touches on the sunsets and other things they were sharing.
It's a hot topic at the moment, social media use for young people.
Yeah.
Um, we're going to come to Tiny Habits and the whole kernel of that research that you've done. But taking kids away and off social media, parents will ask me to ask you, what are some of the nudges they can do or they can take on to enable children to step back from social media?
Yeah. I don't pretend to be an expert on this. I did run an entire class at Stanford on it. And we did develop a tool that has 200 different ways to help reduce screen time. But there's no simple answer for here's what parents can do. But in general, when you look at how do I make a behavior less frequent, how do I tackle a bad habit and so on, one way is to make it harder to do. The flip side of what I just talked about, to get a behavior to happen, make it really, really easy. The flip side is to make it harder to do. And there's various ways of making it harder to do. But I don't want to pretend like that's a great answer in light of the social pressures and the other kinds of motivators that take people to social media.
We're going to touch upon parenting as a theme perhaps later on. I know lots of parents and teachers too listen to this, but let's step back. Let's get some context for those somehow who don't know you. FBM, then
Yeah.
Fogg behavioral model. Three elements that converge. Take us through, if you may. I know you have told the story hundreds of times. Perhaps the genesis of the research and a kind of overview of that.
In some ways, I'm a renegade kind of academic. Um, I didn't really, I mean, I studied the tradition and I was able to master that and research methods and so on. I got my PhD at Stanford. And then I was able to keep a foot in the door at Stanford and start a research lab there, which is really unusual. U- Universities like Stanford don't keep their own PhDs. They make them go to MIT or Yale or whatever, and they bring in. But I was able to do that. And at that point, I felt like I was free to explore in new ways and not just build incrementally on the tradition, traditional academics. And I really felt like the way the academic tradition had developed around understanding behavior and designing for behavior was wrongheaded. It just didn't ring right to me. And I pretty much knew that any behavior needed some motivation and some ability, right? If you had no motivation, you wouldn't do it. If you had no ability, like it was impossible. Like I have a password to Instagram that's like 64 characters and I have to memorize it. Well, it's going to be hard to log in Instagram. And then probably a couple years later, the final piece clicked. And at the time, I called it trigger. Now I call it prompt. It's the thing that says, do this now. And there's a whole bunch of prompts in our life. The phone rings, somebody knocks on the door, a little red circle shows up, a pop up ad. A behavior will not happen without a prompt. The prompt can also be inside you, like an urge. Wow, I'm feeling bored. I want to entertain myself. I'm going to go play this game on, Apple or something, Apple Games. Um, so once those pieces came together for me, I published an academic paper on it and explained how it worked and so on. But even then, that was 2008. Even then, I didn't understand. I take it back. That was 2009. That paper got published. Um, Even then, I didn't understand how important this was. So all behaviors, whether they're habits or one-time actions or temporary behaviors, occur when there's motivation, ability, and a prompt, and they have to come together at the same moment. If any one of those things is missing, then the behavior won't happen. So no prompt, no behavior. No ability, no behavior. No motivation, no behavior. Now, there's more to it than that, but it turns out that that's what comprises behavior. It's really, in some ways, that simple at the topmost level. It's those three components. The complexity comes in when you look at aspects of motivation, aspects of ability, and how to prompt. But it is only those three components that matter: is motivation, ability, and a prompt.
So then if we just touch upon one, let's just talk about motivation. At Opperden, we talk a lot about intrinsic motivation, particularly for kids, sense of purpose, that autonomy, a feeling like they're getting better. Do you distinguish between intrinsic and extrinsic, a kind of reward or fear of punishment?
Short answer, no. That's one of the traditions in academics. I know a lot of people use that, but I think it's a flawed split. I have a different way of looking at motivation. And I have a different way of looking at ability as well. So within those, I've created frameworks or approaches. I mean, it's okay to use intrinsic and extrinsic. Um, but I believe when you go further with those, that starts falling apart and people start getting self-righteous. Like we have to use intrinsic motivation, not extrinsic. And it just leads, I think, to not optimal design solutions. The best solution when you're looking at how do you get yourself or others to do a behavior is to match them with the behavior they already want to do. So the motivation's already there. They already want to do it for whatever. Then you make it really easy, and then you make sure there's a prompt. Let's go back to Instagram. People already wanted to share photos. They didn't go out and try to convince people to share photos. They made it really easy, and they made sure there was a prompt. Now, there might be behaviors like I'm taking a activated charcoal supplement right now. I don't love doing that, but it is in the quest to do some detoxification that my doctor wants me to do. So it's a very simple behavior that, trusting my doctor, I believe will lead to this positive health outcome. So that's still helping me do what I want to do, I want to have a healthy body. I want to be active, vibrant, be able to teach and share effectively. And so this little charcoal thing I don't love, but it's easy enough that I can do it. And I think of the outcome, what I'm working toward by doing it.
It's fascinating. I'd like to ground it in an example that perhaps listeners may be thinking about themselves. I don't know. They want to run a sub 45 10K. They want to run a sub 25K. Let's call
Yeah.
it running because running is zeitgeisty at the moment. Apply the tiny, if you will, the tiny habits method to reaching let's call it a sub 25K.
Yeah. So in my larger work, which I call behavior design, which is how you can analyze any behavior or design for any behavior. Or in this case, the achievement of running I would position as an outcome. So for this outcome, there are dozens of behaviors that you could do to help you achieve that outcome. And in the behavior design approach, there's not one that you have to do. But you have to do probably a substantial set of these behaviors, the training, the nutrition, the recovery. Do you have to do that 4x4 hit thing that has been made so popular by that wonderful runner? And where is he? In Scandinavia, that amazing. Yeah, maybe not, but you have to do something like that to increase your VO2 max. So in the behavior design approach, if that is the outcome that you want, there's probably 50 different behaviors. And when I say behaviors, I mean one-time actions. It might be like some physiological testing or hiring a new coach, and especially habits, and matching yourself with habits that you want to do, you can do, and will be effective. So those three components. So a big part of behavior design, which is, again, the broad label for my work, is instead of trying to get people to do behaviors they don't want to do, you match them with behaviors they want to do, motivation, they can do, ability, and impact that it will lead to higher VO2 max or better recovery or whatever that component is to reach the running goal.
Tiny Habits, then, your book that you're not known most for, but that is obviously a bestseller. It's sold millions of copies. I wonder, particularly now, 2025, when we're filming this, has the desire to change behavior always been this prevalent? I know it's a broad statement,
Yeah.
but I just wonder whether we're in an ecosystem of human psyche that really wants behavior change now, of course, exacerbated by social media and
Yeah.
expectations. But do you get a sense of that, or would Tiny Habits have been this successful 100 years ago?
I have never been asked this question. Congratulations. um, I don't know. My sense is 10 years ago, at least among people I'm connected to through social and so on, people were more starving for ways to create new habits and improve their lives. Um, because a lot of people would just propagate my work and share it and share it and share it. And that's a little less so now. So, and my methods have gotten better, not worse. Now, there's some other variables that have intervened in, let's say, the last 10 years. So I can't make a firm conclusion. But I think what I will say is human beings were hardwired to improve ourselves. We're hardwired to have social status within our community, which is a lot what's going on social media and a lot that's driving. I want to look better. I want to be able to run in this way and brag back to my friends that I'm doing it. That's not recent. That's just really hardwired into us. But I think what's changed is the ability to see other people achieving and do the social comparison for better and a lot for worse, and our ability to basically humble brag, like, hey, I got third place or I got first place in this race. That certainly has increased a lot. And people can judge instantly, nearly instantly, within minutes, whether people are resonating with something you posted and whether your status is going to go up or whether it's going to hurt you. I'm not sure that's a great thing. In fact, I think it's on the whole a bad thing. Um, so I guess my answer is, yeah, people do want to improve their lives, change their behavior, optimize themselves, and it's driven by a number of things, including the social forces, which the volume of that has been turned up
Mm.
thanks to social media.
It's not often when I do a podcast and I have sort of 1,000 questions going on in their head and about 10 minutes to go. I want to touch upon one, and then I'm going to come to some controversial opinions and some advice for young people. But I'm going to ask this, and maybe you haven't been asked this either, but talking to you about behavioral change is like talking to the Pope about Catholicism, right? You know, um, I wonder, like, are there moments are there moments when you question your own motivation or your own ability to achieve something that you thought perhaps you couldn't? I know
Yeah.
your research isn't saying that anyone can do anything. You need an ability, of course.
Yeah.
That's one of the three. But like, do you ever have moments of doubt in your own research about the extent to which it's true?
Not these days. I mean, back when I started goofing around with habits in 2010, so I'm 61 now, almost 62. So back in 2010, I thought I was at the age where I was slipping physically and I would never regain it unless I did it at that moment. And that's when I really explored habit formation and cracked the nut and created the tiny habits method. Today, I know how to create habits. Okay. So I know pretty much most things are possible for me, but I can't do everything at once. So it's really a matter of prioritizing. And I coach thousands and thousands of people. I was probably 10 or 20,000 people in. This would be 2012, 2013. James Clear took my Tiny Habits course in 2013 and got him interested in habits, right? So back then, somebody emailed me and said, "Oh my gosh, this totally works." Now that I know how to create habits, the question is, which habits? And I wrote him back and I was like, yeah, you're right. I don't have necessarily the wisdom to tell you which habits you set. So that's what I'm facing is more prioritization. I know I can do this or this or this or this, but I can't do everything. So I have to use wisdom or a system. I do have a system for prioritizing and focusing on the things that matter and setting aside the things that don't.
I'm gonna have to push you on that. And by the way, that's James Clear's Atomic Habits for
Yeah.
anyone who's questioning. Go on. How do you just in 20 seconds, how do you
I,
prioritize?
I use a process that's in the Tiny Habits book and more. It's called focus mapping, where you outline all the options, you rank them or prioritize them on impact to what you want to achieve, and then basically, can you get yourself to do it or not? So you pick the behaviors, and I hit these components before. So you pick the behaviors or the outcomes that have the combination of high impact for what you want. And again, people want different things, and you can get yourself to do it.
For parents out there, that is your tidbit on how to get your child to pack their bag before they go to bed. BJ, we're coming to the back end of this, but I'm going to be selfish and take at least another 5 minutes of your time. Advice for not entrepreneurs, but for young people going through their education. What advice do you have? You've mentored so many great
Yeah.
people, as I said, Notion, Instagram, Gusto, James Clear, hundreds of others that you haven't, you've been far too modest to mention, but advice for young people then.
Wow. Explore, explore, explore. Follow, I don't want to say, I mean, it's kind of a trite, maybe say follow your passions. It's really true. I took 7 years as an undergrad, not 4, 7. And then I did 2 master's degree and a PhD, all trying to figure out what I wanted to do. So I was in no hurry, but I was at a certain point paying for my own education. So didn't have that constraint. Um, but I think once you get into a field, the advice I would have is question the tradition. Okay. You're taught, especially as graduate students, to here's the tradition, just absorb it and build incrementally on it. There's so much innovation that needs to happen. And I think the way that you can really change the game is to question the tradition and do something different. Now, that's not encouraged by academics, most academics. That's not how the academic system's set up. But I think that's how you have big breakthroughs. And at least for me, that's how you have a lot of fun.
Question the tradition. Sounds so easy. I love it. Um, the beauty of this podcast, or one of them, is the smorgasbord of controversial opinions that people in academia hold about academia, about education, about anything really. So I'm going to press you for a couple of BJ Fogg unpopular opinions that you hold.
That emotions create habits, not repetition. Emotion. And I started coaching people in habits in 2011. 200 to 300 people a week, over and over and over, and evaluating, getting measurements at the end of the week, and did that for 8 years. So added up to over 40,000 people. And I would change and test different things. I'm a scientist, a research scientist. I'm always tweaking stuff. And the idea that repetition was the key to habits was very, very prominent. And I was like, no, it's not. Because I saw people creating habits readily within 5 days, within my 5-day program. And I had lots of evidence for that. And drawing on some other fields, it was reinforcement, not repetition, that creates habits. And the reinforcement is a function of, as I see it, as emotions. Now, that was very unpopular because the repetition meme had been pushed and pushed and pushed. Like, you got to repeat it 66 days and da 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 da. That's hogwash. It's the emotion you feel when you do a behavior. If you feel a strong positive emotion as you do the behavior, it will substantially wire in as a habit. I thought in doing my Tiny Habits book, I would be deeply attacked for this. But I knew I was right. In fact, from a career perspective, I put all of my chips on the table. I put all my credibility on the table. And one of the chapters is entitled Emotions Create Habits. Now, fast forward 5 years later, the conversation around that has changed a lot. I almost never see repetition and repeat, repeat, repeat. So, and even organizations that I haven't worked with directly, I read their resources and they're talking about emotions and self-reinforcement. So usually that takes 10 years to happen. That was my estimate. And so within 5 years, I think it has substantially changed. So it's no longer unpopular, but it certainly was, 5 or 10 years ago when I was putting it out there.
I have to ask before I forget, and it's a non sequitur, but forgive me. What's the first 10 minutes of your day? Like what? Because I'm intrigued. We mentor, we follow, right? So go on.
Okay. I'll go through this morning. So I get up, and I don't set an alarm, but I get up early anyway, and there's no virtue. I'm just wired that way. I just get up, I get out of bed, and I say, it's going to be a great day. I go to the bathroom and I pee. I wash my hands. I go to the kitchen. I pour a big glass of water, fill it with electrolytes. I drink 2 of those. And then I go and sit down at the piano, and I played the piano for about 20 minutes. That was the first part, first 30 minutes of my day.
I'm so glad I asked because so many kids listen to this, or no, they do, and then they go and find daily routines from rubbish Instagrammers. But there is a man who practices what he preaches and has helped a huge number of people. What's next then for BJ Fogg? Where are we going next with the research
We're
to
back to the
finish?
question of priorities. There's so many things I want to do and I feel like are important. But to get really specific, this one's not super groundbreaking. I have 300 people who have certified and trained on active Tiny Habits coaches. So they certified in my methods and so on. As I look at the landscape ahead with AI and so on, one thing that I know is not going away is group coaching groups of people. And I want to help my Tiny Habits coaches be effective in the future. So I am going to work on a different ways of coaching groups to figure out the best way. And ideally, to come up with, here is the perfect or nearly perfect group coaching system, like how many people, how long, how many touch points, how many habits, and so on. So I can hand that off to my coaches so they can be more effective. Now, that's not super groundbreaking. And I've done things like that before, but now I'm really trying to dial it in. And get as close as I can to an ideal group coaching solution.
About 3 months ago, I was walking the Camino in France with a great friend of mine, and he does some work with the government around nudges for medical treatment. And he said the one person we're following, the one person we lean on is a guy called BJ Fogg. And I went, how funny. I've just invited him on the podcast. There's more to say. For those who'd like to follow BJ, you can find him in all major bookshops online, and do check out his course. BJ, personally, it's been a joy, a privilege. Thank you for coming on the podcast. And you've set a huge example to follow, a practical example to follow for parents who want to be better parents, for kids who want better outcomes, for mentors who want to be better mentors. So thank you very much for appearing on this episode of Heads and Tails.
Awesome questions. Thanks for the conversation.